Welcome to Think Big with Dan and Qasim. Join hosts Dan Melnick and Qasim Masood as they explore big ideas, limitless possibilities, and engage with visionaries, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders who dare to dream big, get inspired, motivated, and find practical tips for personal growth. Think big, dream bigger, and ignite your potential.
All right, welcome to Think Big with Dan and Qasim, and our guest today is Nathan. So Nathan, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, tell us where you live and what you do for a living.
Sure. I'm Nathan Beckord. I'm in Marin County, California, which is just north of San Francisco. And I run actually two startups. One's called Founder Suite, which is software for startups raising capital. And the other's called Funding Stack, which is software for VCs and investment bankers who are helping companies raise capital.
Awesome. So do you just spend your time 50-50 managing both, or do you spend more time working on one of them?
Oh, well, we launched Founder Suite over 6 years ago. So that's kind of the OG. And then we started to get, and that was just for startups, right? So we launched that for startups, but we started to get some VCs and investment bankers using it, and they wanted a version that they could work with like their entire portfolio. So we built Funding Stack and soft launched it just a couple of months ago. And so it's not even fully launched yet, but it's kind of, I guess, 75% Funding Stack because it's kind of our new baby, whereas Founder Suite's been up and running pretty smoothly for years now. So, you know, kind of putting a little more attention on the new baby, I guess you could say.
Awesome. So in terms of Founder Suite, can you just tell us more about what it is and how you got the idea to start that business?
Yeah. So I used to work in investment banking to JP Morgan's private placement group, helping companies raise later stage rounds. And then I went off with a couple of friends and started a consulting business called Venture Archetypes that was helping early stage startups raise capital. And a lot of times we would get a startup on as a client and we'd do the research, build them an investor list, put it all in a fancy spreadsheet to track all the meetings and interactions. And then we'd kind of help them, coach them as they're out raising capital. And, you know, that worked fine, but that spreadsheet gets pretty messy pretty quickly. So the idea was actually pretty simple. Like, why don't we build some software for this that could replace the spreadsheet, do a better job of, you know, being actionable and tracking all the activities and follow-up actions. And so we launched that like I said, over 6 years ago as an investor CRM. And then we've just been adding on top of the platform ever since then. So we added a database of investors. We're up to 200,000 investors in that. We added pitch deck hosting, investor updates, email tools, a data room for running like due diligence. So we're just kind of expanding outward to meet various needs of a fundraise, basically.
Sure. So in terms of like your customers using you, can you just talk more about like how the structure works? So like a SaaS product, or they pay one time? Like what does the pricing look like?
Yeah, SaaS model, exactly. It's either monthly or annual, right? There's a discount on the annual plan. Typically, customers will come in. Let's take a simple scenario. They're a early stage startup. Maybe they're raising a seed round, angel round, Series A round. They come in. Maybe they have some investors they've already identified, so they can import those into the CRM, and then they usually spend some time in our database looking for more investors, right? Typically, I tell founders, you need at least 200 or so targets, investor leads and investor prospects. Sometimes that's more, especially when the market is tough like it is right now. So, they come in, they search in the database on their industry, on their location, stuff like that, build out a good list of investors. And then they use the other tools like the pitch deck hosting. They'll send out the deck, send follow-up emails through the system, send out like a monthly investor update. And then as they're making progress with their fundraise, typically they'll create a data room. And there's where they would load up all their confidential information and then invite, the investors that are really serious about potentially investing. They would invite them into the data room. And of course, they're tracking all this in the CRM. So they know exactly where they left off with every investor, where the conversation led to, what the email thread was, what meetings or follow-up action items had to happen. That's kind of how it goes typically.
So in terms of churn, right? Like if somebody raises money, will they still need the software, or do people typically churn once they successfully raise, a round of funding, for example?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a common, it is an issue in our business, I would say, because what happens, right? You go try and raise money, either you're successful or you fail. And that both of those scenarios happen quite a bit. Hopefully, we like to think we're helping you be successful, of course, by doing it the right way, by running a process, by identifying the right investors, but still startups fail all the time. So those guys churn out. The ones that do successfully raise money, it kind of goes two different paths, right? One path is they stay on and they use like our investor update tool to send out, regular monthly or quarterly updates to their new investors. Really good thing to do as a founder is to send out those updates, right? So there's that investor relations component that, does keep people on. The other thing is some of those people also will, once you raise a seed round, they're already starting to think about their Series A round, and they're starting to build a target list of Series A investors, even 6-12 months in advance. Those are very proactive founders. We love those types because they're already thinking, even if they're not actively fundraising, they're thinking about the future round and getting set up for success around that. But then you have people that like, I just raised my round. I don't want to think about fundraising even for 5 seconds until I'm ready to do my next round. And some of those folks will turn off, come back on, 6 months later. So we see sort of that spiky pattern, I guess you could say. So say we have a higher churn rate than probably your average, customer support software that you sort of use daily. But believe it or not, people stay on pretty consistently, especially those founders that are, proactively thinking about their next round, right? The really type A turbo founders, they're the ones that stay on like pretty much for years. Yeah.
But like if somebody churns, wouldn't they lose all that data that they had inputted before?
They wouldn't lose it, but they wouldn't have access to it. So it's not, we don't delete that data, but they would not be able to access all those investors and their updates and things like that.
Makes sense. So let's switch over and talk more about Funding Stack. So with Funding Stack, are you currently in beta mode? And either way, I'm just curious, like, who is your ideal customer for Funding Stack?
Yeah. So, I kind of call it beta, or it's really more of a private launch that we've done. And we're just about a week away from going to general availability on it. So but the product's fully baked. It's really, we're just waiting to add on the data room component, and then we'll release it. The typical customer, there's really 2 use cases. One, I guess 3. One is a venture fund, maybe a first-time fund manager, emerging manager looking to raise their fund, because we have a pretty good database of LPs, family offices, foundations, wealth management firms, trusts, endowments, stuff like that, right? So if you're looking to raise a venture fund, that is one good scenario. Scenario B is an investment banker or a fundraising consultant, someone who works with multiple companies and helps them raise capital. Because part of the difference between Funding Stack and Founder Suite is in Funding Stack, you can set up multiple accounts under one master account and run, 5 different deals at once, right? So that's kind of pretty powerful if you're trying to build a business, helping companies raise capital. I guess the third scenario is a little bit like that, where maybe you're a venture investor or even an angel investor, and you have a bunch of portfolio companies and you want to help them get to their next funding point. Same thing like with the investment banker. You can, create different sub accounts for all your portfolio companies and help them with their fundraise, which that's great value add. If you're an investor in my company and you're helping me get to my next funding point, that's huge, right? Because fundraising is really hard.
So are you essentially, in terms of kind of like consolidating Founder Suite and Funding Stack, are you able to kind of get some of the same customers that were using Founder Suite, or I guess like what has been your go-to-market strategy so far with Funding Stack?
Sure. Yeah. Well, like I mentioned, we had people using Founder Suite. And a lot of times, here's a scenario. They were an investor. They were an angel investor, or maybe a VC, and their portfolio company was raising capital. So they invited that VC into their account. That VC was using it like, hey, this is really cool. I'm using this, helping Acme with their fundraise, but I also have these 6 other companies. So we built a version of Founder Suite for that use case. And that's basically what we spun out into Funding Stack. And now we're Funding Stack. So they kind of started in the same place, I guess you could say. And now they're sort of going on different paths, some different functionality, different data sets. But so we had a couple hundred customers using this Founder Suite version called Agent Model is what we called it. And then we were marketing to, that same demographic since then. So it's kind of nice to have a little bit of a customer base that we could, instant, just out of water kind of thing, right? They were already in the product. In terms of go-to-market, I mean, we're doing a lot of stuff, trying to find more of those types of people, right? So we're doing outbound marketing, email marketing. We're trying to find an event. Something we're like on the hunt for right now is to get a demo booth at a good event where VCs and LPs meet. A lot of these events are $25,000. They're very expensive. So we're trying to find an affordable event to get a demo booth at and kind of, launch and make a big announcement. And a lot of content marketing. That's kind of how we pull people into our sales funnel.
That makes sense. So like in terms of content marketing, I mean, what does that look like for you? Like, do you guys run ads, cold email? Like, how do you just get in front of more people?
Yeah. On the content side, we have a podcast called How I Raised It. So there's my little plug, How I Raised It. And we have interviewed 260 or so founders who've raised capital, startup founders, and we talk about their business and how they raise money for it. In the past year, we've started to interview VCs. So how did you become a VC? How did you, transition? There's a lot of different stories, right? But one common story is maybe you were working at a successful startup that went public. You made some money on that. You started angel investing in startups. That was working well. So you decided to formalize it and become a VC and go raise a fund. So we've been interviewing those type of people, creating podcasts around that. Some of that content we'll take and repurpose into a blog article or guest article. Like we published a guest article recently on TechCrunch about raising a venture fund as a solo GP. If you're just a one man, one woman band, how do you do that? So some guest posting, that's been pretty good. And then email marketing, I hate to say it. It's almost like a dirty word sometimes, but like cold outbound email to very targeted people, really trying to identify, hey, you look like an emerging VC trying to raise their first time fund, email you.
So in terms of TechCrunch, like, was that successful? I feel like there's this kind of like with PR, some people say it works, some people like them say it doesn't. So were you able to directly correlate that article to, I guess, like increase in your business and sales?
So really have not been able to. Part of that is there's a couple of reasons for that. One, listen, I'm grateful that TechCrunch takes our content and accepts it and publishes it, but a lot of times they will put it on behind their paywall. So some of it's on the free TechCrunch site, the others for their paid subscribers. And so that doesn't get as much reach as an article that would be free. Okay. Second, we don't really have a good way of tracking. To be totally honest, like I can't, unless someone tells me, hey, I read about you guys on TechCrunch and here I am signing up, have a hard time really tracking that. Google Analytics can do a little bit of that, but it's not a perfect science. So no, I think we're doing a good thing by doing that, but I don't actually know. Probably need to hire someone to really connect the chain there for us. Yeah.
Makes sense. So what would you say is the biggest challenge that you face in the business overall today?
Oh, good question. Like any startup, I mean, even though Funding Stack has a bit of a history and, like a small built-in customer base, it's just another startup that no one's heard of, right? And this is the common problem that all startups face is like, no one has heard of you. They don't know, they don't care about you. They don't, I'm making these numbers up, but until you hear about a business like 5 times, 7 times, right? It sort of goes in and out your ear, right? You kind of have to hear a company's name several times before you really start to pay attention. Like, oh, maybe I should actually. So there's that challenge of just building a brand from almost scratch, not quite scratch, but almost scratch. And, and then of course there's coming up against what people are already doing, right? We're reaching out to investment banker type. They are often already using Salesforce, HubSpot, PitchBook, whatever. Like you can insert a bunch of different companies there. And a lot of times those are annual contracts. So we're coming in, in November or August or whatever. And they're like, I have 6 more months on this that I paid a huge amount for this software. So what can you do? It's hard to get those folks to switch off. So these are just kind of your standard, challenges of any startup, but it's things we're going through right now. How do we build the awareness and get people trying it and hopefully loving it? And then of course you have, it is a new product. So you've got people like, hey, I like this, but I need it to do XYZ. So you're kind of tweaking the feature set around what your customers really need, which no one gets that perfect right out the bat. Yeah.
So obviously 2023 is wrapping up. So what would you say are some of your goals for 2024 as you're going to scale up this business?
Yeah, I'm super fired up and optimistic, even though the market is a little choppy right now. It's fun. I mean, I've been doing this Founder Suite we launched 6 years ago, but we even worked on it about 2 years before that. So I've been doing that for quite a while, and it's been great. We've helped over 50,000 startups, with their fundraise, have a big multi-billion-dollar success rate on that. But it's fun to start something new, frankly. So for 2024, we're just going to blow the doors out on Funding Stack. We've built a sales team. We've never had a sales team for Founder Suite. It was pretty much self-service. We've built out a sales team. They're getting up and getting their sea legs and, getting into a rhythm here, doing some pretty clever outbound marketing things, and really hope to, just blow the doors out with Funding Stack. So that's basically it.
Yeah, that's exciting. So what would you say is the one biggest piece of advice that you wish you knew before you started Founder Suite?
Yeah. I'm going to give you two things. One is, if I knew how hard startups were, I might not have done it. So I guess that's not really advice, but it's the advice there is it's going to be really, really hard if you're just starting out with a startup. It's harder than you think it's going to be. It takes longer, more sleepless nights, more, running out of money and feeling like your dream is dead or dying, right? I mean, so it's way harder but if you knew that in advance, no one would ever start a company. So that's not really good advice. The other advice I guess I would give myself is just spend more time listening to customers, really. Even today, we have Intercom as our customer support, and I see basically every single note or, issue that our customers have, every feature request. I really like staying close to our customers, even though I now have people doing the customer support. I still see it all. And frankly, I mean, I didn't do as much of that in the early days. A lot of it was like, oh, I have an idea for a product. Let me build that product, and hopefully the world likes what I've built. Well, that worked okay. But if I had been really, talking to customers, interviewing customers, understanding their day-to-day life, their pain points, I think we could have gone faster and saved a lot of time and effort. So.
Makes sense. So if somebody watching this wanted to reach out to you, do you mind sharing your company website or social media handle? Just best way to get in contact with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm pretty open book. It's Nathan at Founder Suite. If you want to email me. On Twitter, we're at Founder Suite, FOUNDERSUITE. If you want to check out the Founder Suite, it's that URL, foundersuite.com. If you want to check out Funding Stack, it's fundingstack.com, just like it sounds. Right now, it's a wait list sign up, so you can't quite sign up, but that'll be gone in a week or so. And then actually, I'll give this little plug. If you want to connect or follow or whatever on LinkedIn, it's, LinkedIn / whatever, Nathan Beckord, Beckord. But we put a lot of really good entrepreneurial content on LinkedIn. That's maybe one of our biggest content channels, really good stuff, just lists of investors. What did we publish this week? We published a thing about how much equity to give advisors based on a lot of data, so useful stuff for founders. So connect or follow on LinkedIn.
Sounds good. Awesome. Well, Nathan, we're rooting for you, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate having me on. This is fun.
Awesome. Thanks. All right. Bye.
Bye.